Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Wednesday night stream. I'm Joey D, aka Death and Stuff. We have a very special stream tonight. As you can see, there is an EDH deck on our screen right now, and we have none other than the EDH master himself, Jason Alt.
Hey everybody, welcome to our first ever co-stream with Death and Stutch on Death and Stutch. Death and Stuff on Twitch. It's too many things for me to say. It's a co-stream, so we're going to be running this on the Brainstorm Brewery YouTube as well as on Joey D's Twitch. And what he's asked me to do is give him a little bit of deck tech help with his old and tired Mayael the Anima deck. If he weren't tired of playing the deck, it's got an Iona in it, and that's got to come out. So while we're in there rooting around in the deck's guts, we might as well give it a whole new facelift in its guts.
Yeah, I don't think people would be very happy if I cast Iona anymore.
Cowards. Okay, so
Oh,
so what I've done is I've brought up Architect here. Architect is a great site to use because EDH scrapes it, so you know if you register your deck, they'll have your data. But another great thing about Architect is something called the Sandbox. I'm in Sandbox mode right now. See the URL right there? It says Sandbox. You're not committed to anything right now. You can just kind of play around and add cards and take cards out as you want. If I scroll up a little more, you'll see Sandbox mode not being saved. It's a custom, currently, well, it says legal, but is it? Ooh, is it? It says it's got 99
not.
cards.
I might need to
Yeah.
update that.
Another great thing about
Yeah.
Architect is over here, you got the stats, you got your mana cost, your type, and your curve, and your colors, and you got all this stuff. Mail's going to have a typical, a higher than typical average CMC. We got about 5.13 because the deck really gets going once you get in the higher mana. So Joey would like this deck to be a little different. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your kind of what your wants are for the new version?
Okay, so anybody that follows the stream knows that I'm a competitive constructed player at heart. So one of the things that Mail does that you don't really get to do in constructed a whole lot is you get to just jam these giant creatures that have great effects and do crazy things and kind of take over the battlefield. And that's why I really like Mail because that's something I don't get to do often. And hitting a Gisela and an Avacyn or something like that off the top, or Blazing Archon, so no one can attack you, and then you can jam at them. It's a lot of fun. That's kind of why this is my EDH deck. I don't really play EDH much. It's a casual format for me. I'm not competitive in this format, so I'm just trying to do fun things. And the funnest thing to me is jam giant creatures into people's faces until I win. So the new version, obviously, we have to take out Iona. There's haven't incorporated into the list that we're gonna have to look at and consider. Like Ilharg the Red Boar, I see is one of the newer additions. That's a good card. Terror of the Peaks, Elder Gargaroth, and Garruk's Uprising are considerations, as well as
I
M21
see.
Garruk. I haven't really looked at the list since then. So one of the problems this deck has is A, ensuring I always have my mana to do things because this does get a little expensive, and then B, ensuring I do not whiff when I sink 6 mana into Mael's activated ability. Those are kind of the two problems I've had. One of the things I stay away from though is I'm not an infinite combo person in casual EDH, so I'm not trying to like one shot robot in a turn, but if it happens kind of thing. And I really just want to win with the cards in my own deck.
Okay. So, you mentioned you want to win with the cards in your own deck because I really like in a shell like this running something like Atali or maybe even like Stolen Strategy or something like that. This isn't a big mana deck per se, so you're not going to be able to generate a ton of mana to like pump it all in a captivating crew or something like that. One suggestion I had was potentially running Kiki Jiki because you have a ton of ETB creatures, and with Kiki Jiki you can run Zealous Conscripts. What I like about the Kiki Conscripts combo is the fact that neither of those cards is terrible on its own. Conscripts is, basically a smaller Molten Primordial, and Kiki Jiki just gets value with all these ETB creatures. not a ton of whom. All you have quite a few legendary creatures in the deck, but like copying a Terastodon or Woodfall Primus or something like that is pretty strong. But if you don't want to do an infinite combo like that, because like you said, this is a casual format, I don't think Tooth and Nail is going to be that good in this deck.
Now recording.
Running it like that, I think Tooth and Nail is fine in Mayael in general. So maybe I think the first thing we do is we go through and we make a few cuts. Number one with a bullet, a legal card. I own a band in the format. It's not that fun. And just like that, it auto updated up here to 98. So the sandbox mode will track all your changes and make sure you have the right number of cards. I actually use this site when I build decks for my article, because before they're like, I was just like counting on the screen. They're like, you submitted a 97 card deck. I'm like, add some basics. So now when I write an article, I build the deck in the Architect sandbox. And you can make an account if you want, log in, save all your decks like that. But the sandbox mode is it's cool, and some of the time it'll display prices. So you can get an idea of, this is no longer a $70 card because it's in the, this is the art from the new, whatever, the spell book that it's in. So Sylvan Library is a good thing to have. You might want a Miri's Guile also. That's a suggestion I have. And to join your scroll rack, you might want a Sensei's Divining Top. So we're going to start finding some room for some of those cards that add a little bit of consistency to the deck. The very first thing I want to do is the most exciting, which is going to Zendikar Rising and looking at all the new cards that could go in the deck. Here's one I kind of like, Ancient Green Warden. You can play lands from your graveyard, and if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. I kind of like Morog, Fury of Akum. I think Morog definitely makes the deck, and I think if you have to run a few extra fetch lands to make Morog even better, you potentially do that. Now, each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time as it attacked this turn. That's not great in a deck like this because, like, all your creatures are huge, and you're not gonna like scape shift in this deck. But I think it's solid. You don't want to pay the 6 mana for it, but you're going to be cheating into play with Mayael anyway, and you get that landfall trigger. So even though this card has not been like officially released, if you go into Architect, and spell it correctly, it'll bring it up. You hit the little green plus sign, bang, the deck list, there it is. So our first change right now is taking out an illegal card and adding a brand new one that I really like. So we brought the average converted mana cost down by 0.005, which was really important to us, and we added a finisher. What do you think of a creature that gives you additional combat phases, Joey?
That sounds great because my creatures are giant and want to stomp things to death.
Yeah, absolutely. And having giant creatures means that additional combat phases are all the more punishing. So we can go over 99 cards and cut. So I think what I want to do is add Sensei's Top. And potentially Miri's Guile. And it still says it's legal. That's funny, but it's 101 cards right now. We're going to need to cut that down before we're done. How do you feel about the number of lands in the deck, Joey?
I mean, that's more where I'm going to defer to your expertise. So originally this deck, the original build of this deck was actually your EDH deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one I used to borrow from you way back in the day, and I kind of enjoyed it. And I don't think this is really your style when I think of you playing EDH. And I was like, hey, let me get that deck off of you. And then after I played it for a while, I was like, I need to update this. And all I did literally was I went to the EDH Rec website, typed in Mayael, clicked average deck list, and updated it with everything they had in it and was like, this looks good. And really never thought about it again because, I only play every now and then, and kind of just kept the mana base the way it was there. Some games, you get really good draws like, Land, Soul Ring, Signet, Go, and it's never a problem. But other times, it does seem like either we're land light or we don't have enough ways to find them. Sometimes it does feel like I'm mana light. But as far as the mana base goes, I think you would know better than I would as to how to better sculpt it.
Well, I was going to suggest adding Evolving Wilds, which you have. The only card I really don't like in here is Temple of the False God, because I feel like that hoses you early in the game. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Mayael the Anima, it costs 6 mana to activate it. 3 colorless, a red, a green, and a white to activate it. So you do need to get to 6 mana to make this deck do basically anything. So you don't want to run 20 lands in the deck, even though you're not 100% always trying to pay the mana cost on your creatures. But I think we want to make sure that we have enough lands in the deck. The problem is, the more lands you add for consistency, the less consistent you are on Mayael's activations, as Joey can attest.
Yeah, that's definitely been a problem.
Cultivate, Explosive Vegetation, Farseek, Kadama's Reach, those all kind of pull the lands out of the deck and give you a shuffle. I actually don't hate some of those spells if we're going to play Morag, and I don't even hate Evolving Wilds, and I would consider maybe adding a Terramorphic. I hate this, I'm cutting it. We could probably go as low as 35 lands, but I would never go lower than that. I think 36 is probably a good number. So we're down to 100 cards. Well, we need to make one more cut, but we still have a bunch of stuff to add. So are there any creatures you feel are sort of underperforming in the deck?
That's a good question. I think I have a pretty good mix. There's nothing I really hate. I know some lists don't play It That Betrays anymore. I'm not really sure why, but that's kind of a pet card I've kept in the list.
Well, It That Betrays is a $17 card versus something like, a little bit cheaper. Not that you have a ton that's cheaper, like Combustible Gearhulk, I guess. Blazing Archon's a couple of bucks, but it could just be people forgot about Dre also.
Maybe. It's one of my favorite cards, and I have a Japanese foil, so I kind of keep it in the deck.
There you go. When they sacrifice a permanent for any reason, so if somebody plays like a spell that makes every player sack a creature, like a Plague Crafter or something like that, you get all that stuff, provided you don't have to sack your That Betrays. So,
all right,
that's not something I would
real
cut.
quick, back to the mana base. We have a YouTube question. Bonder's Enclave instead of Temple, ? Thoughts?
Well, let's look at Bonder's Enclave, what it is and what it does. I like searching stuff up in EDH Rec. Because it's very slow when you need it to not be. Well, let's look at it in Architect, I guess. I typed Boner's Enclave. That's the kind of enclave where I want to live.
I don't think that's how you spell that.
So Bonder's Enclave is a brand new card from Ikoria, and it lets you draw a card if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, which you should. Bonder's Enclave is quite good. What did he suggest cutting? A temple?
That Temple of the False God that we took out, that you already said you didn't like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is just a suggestion for a replacement for that.
I like Bonder's Enclave a lot. That was a great suggestion. If we do strip something out, you got a lot of... I don't love these in every deck anymore.
What, the garrisons?
It was Boros, the bounce lands. I think they're good in landfall decks, and then this just became a landfall deck, kind of. So maybe we leave it alone, but...
Yeah.
What do you think?
They can lead to some awkward beginning of the games. Because, if you have a land and a garrison,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to put that back, but at the same time, you're starting a couple turns behind unless you have, something that you can throw out there first, like a soul ring.
It gives you three
And
man
we're
on
not all,
three, but you're discarding.
yeah, but we're not all Jason Alt playing soul ring on turn one.
Excuse me, that's our other friend Ben. That's not me. Um, so we looked at Zendikar Rising a little bit and looked at some of the stuff like, hey, Nahiria's lithoforming could be really good with Morag, and maybe Valakut Exploration, but since we're not really a landfall deck, there's not going to be a ton of stuff on this page that's really going to benefit us all that much. So, as cool as the new cards are, I think anything newer than like It That Betrays is new to this deck. So, so what we're going to want to do is go back to Mayael's page on EDH Rec and kind of look at what this is, new cards. And this is stuff from Core Set 2021 that a lot of people are adding. Garruk Unleashed is particularly interesting. So you can make a creature get 3/3 and trample, which is good. You can make a beast, and you can put a loyalty counter back on him if your opponent has more creatures, which happens. And the emblem is really good. At the beginning of your end step, you may search your library for a creature card, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle your library. So you're trying to play this on 4 and protect it with big creatures, because you're tough to swing at in this deck. And that emblem is pretty good. So if we did want to add Garruk's Unleashed, Domri Raid is in the deck because it was in the average male, the Anima deck on EDH Rec, and I still don't know why. I don't think Domri Raid is all that good in this deck. Like, the fight is fine.
Yeah, so that's kind of my question. Obviously, it's more of an abstract question, but how do you feel about planeswalkers in a deck that's just trying to find creatures? Domri's been in the build since I've had the deck, and he's pretty much underwhelmed every time I've ever seen him. And like, part of the whiffing with Mayael is like, oh, there's a planeswalker there that I can't get. So I found it interesting that Garruk was listed so high on the EDH Rec page. So I guess, how do you feel about planeswalkers in a deck that's really looking for mostly creatures off the top?
Well, I was 100% going to cut Domri Raid. If you don't want to add the Garruk. If you don't want to add Gary. Oh, there's already a Gary. Oh, boy.
Oh, no.
If you don't want to add Dwayne, as we're calling him. If you don't want to add Mr. Uprising, I think just cutting the Domri is safe. I don't hate planeswalkers in the deck. I do not like Domri, and I think that was just sort of a, hey, he's in the average deck suggested by EDH Rec. Next we have cards that are reprinted, that could make them a little bit more affordable. I particularly like Austere Command in a deck like this, but between instants and sorceries you have 13 cards, and that's kind of a lot, and they're pretty much dedicated to just fixing your mana. And like, you've got a Wrath of God that if they're going super aggro and you're real slow getting set up, you can help yourself out immensely. One card I do think a lot of Mayael decks should run that you are running is Lurking Predators. I really like that. So looking through like the high synergy cards, synergy score on EDH Rec means like a Soul Ring has a negative synergy score because it is more likely to be found in a lot of decks than this one specifically. A high synergy score means it is more likely to be found just in this deck. So Terastodon is basically a Mayael card. So it's got a high synergy score. Elvish Piper, not a ton of people are playing Elvish Piper. One high synergy card that I really think you should consider is Ilharg. And I think we should find room for Ilharg. When it attacks, you can put a creature card from your hand, tapped and attacking. You return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So if you have if it's something huge with an ETB, you put a Terastodon in, attacking, blow up a bunch of permanents on a player you're not attacking so they can't block with their new elephants, and then just put it back in your hand for more triggers. I think that's That's pretty neat. And when Ilhark dies, you put it into its library third from the top, which means you're very likely to hit it with your next Mayael activation. I really like Ilhark a lot. So go ahead.
The Boar God's a really good card. So I've sat down and looked at EDH Rec a few times, but like I said, I always just click average deck lists.
Sure.
And like I never know if that's really good enough to do what I'm doing. I don't know. I'm more of a pick up a list and play kind of person. I'm not much of a brewer, and like conceptualizing what 100 cards does together is a little bit difficult for me.
Sure.
But I was just like, yeah, this board would be great, but like, do I need to fashion the deck around the board? Can I just take a creature out and put it in and it'll be fine? Those kind of things. I guess it's still hard for me to get my mind around that as far as EDH goes.
Sure. And that's fine. I think what you could do a little bit more is play a little bit more EDH, and that would serve as testing. So now that you got a webcam set up, we should be playing EDH a little bit more often together. And when you do, I don't mind if you run on a webcam game Atali Primal Storm. When it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. I think Atali is completely fine for webcam. Every player flips up a card that was going to be known information. So something like Gonti is a little awkward. Something like Bribery is very awkward. Something like Atali, perfectly fine. Everybody flips up the top card and exiles it. And then if you want to go to the Etsy store for Infinite Tokens and buy some of those Infinite Tokens that you can write on with a dry erase marker, any spell that you like out of there, you just represent on your board with an Infinite Token. And Atali plays really well. So I'm going to insist you play Atali, even though you told me you like playing with your own cards. This card is absolute nutter butters.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good. It has a lot of high upside if you're, it's just, when I sit down to play EDH, it's a lot of the times it's like before F&M at the LGS or something like that, and I don't always trust people's that, like, sometimes people sit down with precons, which is totally fine, but like I feel like Atali, you want to know like they have high powered cards you're stealing, but it's still a great card, and I'll definitely include it in the deck.
So here's the thing about playing against precons. I actually think Atali is better in that situation. So some of you may know I write the 75% EDH column on Cool Stuff Inc. It was a deck building ethos I came up with. And one of the ways to make sure you're building 75%, which means you're going to be appropriate for most EDH tables. Like, if you sit down with an unknown group of people and you don't know what they're doing, if you ask people power level, everybody says their deck's a 7. A guy who put 3 cards in a precon says their deck's a 7. A guy with a Ramirez de Pietro pirate tribal deck with no red cards says it's a 7. A pub stomper says it's a 7. So don't trust that. Trust your deck is going to be appropriate for the table on the basis of using some of their cards against them. So if you were playing Atali and you flip up a precon card, guess what? You're playing against a guy with a precon. So, like, it doesn't matter what you flip up. They're not going to overpower you with their precon deck if you got a bad card from them, is what I'm saying. So I think Atali actually makes sure your deck is a little bit more appropriate for the table, and on that basis, I really like including it. Because, the precon deck can usually handle precon deck cards. So you're not going to, like, give someone a real feel bad by taking, like, their one good card. For the most part, you're just going to get something that their deck can handle because the card came out of their deck.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now there's a card that's way more of a feel bad, which is Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. I'm not going to tell you to take that out, but I think that has a tendency to be kind of a feel baddy card. And if I were cutting, that might be somewhere I would start, just because Mayael decks have a tendency to make people a little bit scared. They're like, oh, better not let the person activate their Mayael. You never know what they're going to flip off the top. And then you get a Vorinclex, and they're like, see, this is exactly what I thought. And when you were running Iona, we had a little bit of that kind of action going, too. So, what? Yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Vorinclex can make some feel bads. I guess it's really hard to gauge with this deck because when it runs well, it overpowers a table very quickly. But like when you whiff a lot, it's like, oh, it's not a very good deck. And I think that that level of variance is why it's not super popular amongst EDH players. Well, I don't know. I don't hear a lot of people talk about their Mayael decks, I guess. Um, so like, yeah, there's definitely been situations where people are like, he probably has powerful creatures and it's 3 versus 1, and if I can't stabilize quick enough, I'm just dead. Which I'm sure you know what that's like.
Yeah, I'm the arch enemy a lot.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of why like I don't have you see Ulamog on your screen right now. That's not in the list because people start seeing Eldrazi and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not cool. I'm just trying to have a good time. I don't necessarily need to win every game, but I want to be a presence at the table. I don't want to just be someone that's ignored because I'm not doing anything.
So I think we don't really need to mess with your creatures anymore. I just made a couple suggestions of cards I thought should really be in the deck. If you're just trying to have fun, I think the creatures you have are perfect. And what we should do is reduce the amount of times you spend whiffing.
I agree.
So what we already did was we added a Sensei's Divining Top and a Miri's Guile. You have a Worldly Tutor. Now let's look through the mail instants and sorceries for anything else that might improve your consistency. And there are a bunch of cards I see already that I think potentially could go in the deck. One is Congregation at Dawn. One is Eladamri's Call. And I don't even hate Return of the Wild Speaker, but I love that card, but I don't know why I would play it here. But I think Congregation and Eladamri's Call both deserve a look. What do you think about those cards?
I mean, yeah, there are really good options. I like Eladamri's Call. That's really nice. Actually, these are both Call and Congregation at Dawn are both very good options. Again, Return of the Wild Speaker I think would be a little bit awkward in this deck.
Mm-hmm. I don't love it in this deck specifically.
It's just kind of high costed because like I'm not going to be able to cast that and activate a Mayael in the same turn, whereas I could definitely call or a Congregation and do that. I think conceivably.
I think those are both ads because they're just going to make your deck more consistent, which is what we're looking to do. So we don't even need to add better creatures to make the deck more consistent. So. Yep, I think we're gonna. Yep.
Yeah, we'll get them back. Just hold tight. Just hold tight. We'll be right back, crew.
You're working now?
Now recording.
Yeah,
Oh.
can you see my screen now?
There we go. We're back. Yep, we're good. We're good. Yep.
Yep, got a little.
There we go.
Yep, got a little zealous with my dragging, and I.
You just start clicking random stuff.
No, I dragged the name Eladamri's Call onto the Discord on my other monitor, and it just like, oh, I'm gonna go to I'm gonna Google Eladamri's Call. I did it. I did what you wanted me to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Yep. So cool, we did it. So the only thing I might consider at this point, on top of that kind of stuff, is more ways to cheat. Selvala Stampede and Finalia Devastation are two cards from the sorceries portion that I kind of like. Selvala Stampede, they're not going to give you what you want, but it turns out everything in your deck is so good that like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I already have Stampede in the deck. Great card. Yeah.
So you do. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Stampede's in the deck. I agree with that. I hadn't really considered the finale, but it seems like a good inclusion now that you mention it.
It's just like a little bit. It's one of those cards where, like, yeah, Green Sun Zenith is great at making your deck consistent, but Finale is just sort of like, if the game should end, you know, if you have 12 mana, you should be able to just like, look, we're gonna end this. I'm gonna stomp you really hard with something. So
we have a little bit of a suggestion from the YouTube channel. Deck could probably use some tormenting voice effects to smooth out the draws. Any thoughts on those types of effects in this deck?
I don't necessarily love that kind of effect, but when you need something like that, you don't really care what you're discarding. So I was really hoping that just in the early game, you don't really care what you're drawing. You know, you just kind of want to just ramp your mana. And if you can hit a top, a library, a guile, or something like that, all you're trying to do is just play lands until you can get Mayael out and start activating Mayael. So if you'll...
Yeah, and I think... Yeah, and Carl in the YouTube mentions it, you know, just have Sylvan Library and don't worry about it, right?
Because, like, I don't want to say EDHREX the authority, but, like, you don't see a lot of those type of cards show up just because I think if you play enough Mail, you don't always love to do stuff like that. So I think that's a great suggestion, and I would say if you're doing instant speed, quote-unquote, card draw, and you want something targeted like Call, Worldly Tutor, Congregation, because, you know, later in the game, it's going to be game ending versus like drawn late. Something like Tormenting Voice is just sort of like, oh, I hope this Council of the Sore Tommy gets me there. So, like, I don't want to poop on your suggestion, but I don't know that it's right for this build specifically. And I don't know if, Joey, do you feel like drawing generic cards is something that you were looking to do, per se?
I'm not going to say it's a terrible suggestion because I understand fatties sometimes get stuck in your hand, but I think that's where the scroll rack and the divining top really come into play, where we're trying to put them back in the library so we can activate our mail and get them. Whereas drawing random cards isn't exactly what we want to be doing, and pitching fatties might not be the best way, you know, from our hand to our graveyard, which we don't recur in this deck, probably isn't what we want to be doing. So, I mean, I think it's a good suggestion. It's an angle I haven't thought about, but I just don't think that's what we want to do. And this is also a deck where we're trying to use all of our mana. We're almost greedy every turn. And I don't know if that really helps us get stuff to the battlefield to win the game, I guess.
If stuff does get stuck in your hand, I would... Like, rather than discarding it just because you would rather see new cards, I would rather have stuff get stranded a little bit and then amulet it out or piper it out. And you're running both of those cards. And there are actually more of these. There is a Portal Piper, too.
Yep.
You have something Priest. It's from Portal. Why don't we test the search functionality of Architect?
Another suggestion from YouTube as well, Thematic Compass. They asked if it's in the list. It's currently not in the list. Thoughts about that as a card in the context of this list?
Why don't we look up what that card does so we can...
We totally know, but we got to make sure everyone on stream
I know
knows.
what it does. I don't know what
assume.
I don't know what the backside does. So this is the flip card where you can search for a basic and shuffle, and then if you have 7 cards or 7 lands, you flip it, and it turns into untap target attacking creature an opponent controls or remove it from combat. Like Maze of Ith effects are usually pretty good, and this does tap for a true colorless also. Compass on 2 is Not that bad, actually. I don't necessarily hate it in this deck.
Okay. I mean, it's an interesting consideration. I think early it's great. We do have effects to get it out of our hand if it gets stuck in there late and we don't really need it. I don't know if we really need the Maze of Ith effect in this deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I mean, it's a good card and it have its place. Like if I slam that on two and I can just get all the lands I need and just run along, that's great. But I don't know if I'm really looking for the flip side of it, and I feel like that's kind of what you want to get to, right? Like that's your goal. And if that payoff isn't high enough, I don't know if it's worth it. But I could be totally wrong.
It's a good suggestion. I don't love it in the deck. I don't hate it necessarily. Like I'm not gonna tell someone they're wrong to run it, but like it doesn't seem like either one of us want to cut something to add that per se. Right now, I'm at the part where we getting comments. That's great. Let's read them all.
Oh yeah. A couple more things. So the first one is a question that Jason will be able to answer better than I can. Is this something for BSB Patreon supporters? Question mark.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like so people who are at $40 at patreon.com/BSB, we've been really trying to engage with. So if you're at that $40 level, hit us up. We want to play games with you. We want to do something like this. We may even open it up to 20s if we don't get enough 40s hitting us back up. If this is something you wanted to do on the stream, we're trying to do more video content with our patrons. So if you're not a patron at patreon.com/BSB, there's a lot of cool swag you get out of it. It's the Discord's really worth it. And we think when we do a Patreon pitch, we're like, look, our podcast actually actively makes you money. Like if you buy one copy of all of our picks of the week, you're up a couple $100 on the year usually. If you just buy one copy when we saying at the end of the year sell, So we think since we make people money, giving a little bit of it back and getting a lot of good stuff in return it's a fair ask. So if this is something you wanted to do, yeah, that's something we can make happen for our patrons for sure.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm obviously a patron. I actually have the BSB shirt. I'm drinking beer out of a BSB cup right now. I have a BSB mat on my desk right now with the deck laid out on it. It's free value. I mentioned this on my stream leading up to the Double Masters release. Using the information I learned from BSB, I bought a box of Double Masters for free. By picking my bulk, by buying cards low and selling high, I actually generated a box for free, which is a pretty big deal in a heavy reprint set. And I opened quite a bit of value, so it was free value. So I can't recommend it enough. So let's go back. We have a couple more comments in the YouTube. So back to the compass discussion. It prevents malignus, unlike Mazewood. So that's a consideration.
Yeah.
And then also someone recommended Sylvan Tutor.
Yeah, so Sylvan Tutor's sorcery speed, which is less good than Worldly, but I don't even hate it. Just the redundancy is fine. Sylvan Tutor, if it sort of solves the problem you were looking for, you want to whiff as little as possible, and Sylvan Tutor is the fact that it's 1 mana means you just do it main phase, right? It doesn't matter. You're not going to go tutor up a silver bullet you're like, oh, I need a Terrastodon right now. Mayael powers go. You're going to want to cast and Mayael main phase, which you don't love to do, but if you're getting the exact creature you need, it super doesn't matter. So I kind of like that suggestion a lot, actually. We're going to put it in the list, and that doesn't mean we're not going to cut it later, because we're going to have to cut this down to 99 cards, but you could definitely jam a $70 portal card in this deck if you wanted. Right, Joey? With the, yeah, Joey,
sure.
I'm sorry. I thought you were getting value from being a patron, so why don't you just buy a $70 card, or is the advice you're getting from BSB really not that good? I'm just gonna
No,
bully you
it's
into
good.
buying
I
a,
mean,
buying a $70.
let's jam that in there. It sounds like you have one to sell me, is what it sounds like. So here's an interesting idea that came from my Twitch chat from BGX Mage, which is Josh, formerly a local, works for SCG now. So he said he played against Mayael deck that had a fat stack that they kept in a box, and basically it was a stack of all the fatties they had for the deck, and then they shuffled X number of them into the deck before the game started. So, like, say we want 37 creatures, I have a box of 100 of them, I shuffle it, and then I just put them in the deck.
I mean,
What do you think of that approach?
I think if the deck is generic fatties, you can put a lot of really fun stuff in there, like, there's Moldgraf Monstrosity, or even something like Titanoth Rex. Is that how that's pronounced? T-Rex, Whoopi Goldberg's sidekick from that movie. T-Rex is just like an 11/11 trample. And you're not going to be cycling it, you're going to be playing it for 6 mana. So if you wanted to do something like that, that's a fun idea. That's not what you are going for per se, but like if you're getting bored with your Mayael deck, that's definitely that makes your tutors a lot more fun too. It's like, I'll cast Worldly Tutor and see what the hell I shuffled in.
Yeah, I mean that makes me, that gives me anxiety because I'd want to like
because you
cast
want to
tooth and nail and like or a tutor and go through my deck and just be like, what's in here? Because like, you know, a lot of the times I've played this deck enough, I know what my outers off the top are. You know what I mean?
You want to know
doing that, I would be terrified.
You want to know you got a Blazing Archon in the deck, or an Angelic Arbiter, or whatever that thing is that doesn't let them cast even cost spells, stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's a little too chaotic for Joey, personally.
I think I'd have a nervous breakdown at the table. I'd be like, I don't know what's going on. This is not good.
No tutors, just mail all the time. It's like, well, I hit 5 creatures, but I still whiffed because it's all trash. That's funny.
Yeah, it's like there's a board wipe on the stack, and I want to go find my Avacyn to save my world, and it's not in the deck.
Now, if you know what I'm about, you know that I jam more enchantments and fewer instants and sorceries than a lot of people. So I already added an enchantment tonight in Mirror's Guile. If I were to add more, I like Cream of the Crop. And I like Defense of the Heart. I mean, I also like Burgeoning and Smothering Tithe and Greater Good and Year of Maya. But, like, restraining ourselves, I would consider potentially a Cream of the Crop, because I think you can stack your deck with that. And that's what you're going for. I don't know, how do you feel about Cream of the Crop? When a creature comes into play under your control, you can look at the top X cards. X is that creature's power. If you do, put one of those cards on top of your library and the rest on the bottom in any order. So if you played a smaller creature, you could, you know, just kind of flip the cards around. But if you played a big creature, you could potentially dig real deep and get the exact card you need. I like Cream of the Crop in Mayael a lot. I actually sold Joey the deck without Cream of the Crop because I was testing it in Maelstrom Wanderer, where I also like it. So that's a card you might want to consider. Realistically, you're probably not going to buy a Sylvan Tutor. So I think realistically you would put a Cream of the Crop in the deck, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting approach. Being able to kind of filter what we're putting on top and maybe what we find later with Mayael is kind of what we want to do. Because I think it definitely depends on the situation you're in and what decks are at the table, what creature you're looking for. Like, sometimes it's not, I want any fatty off the top. It's like, everybody has a lot of creatures. I'm a little behind. I better find my Blazing Archon or I'm dead, you know, stuff like that. So I do think that's a card I definitely would want to consider or test in this list.
It digs you for 0 mana, which is, it's a consideration, you know.
Yeah.
Plus, every time you play it, you get to do the Macho Man Randy Savage voice. Like, that's a consideration you need to make. It's like, do I want to say that I'm the cream of the crop? Yeah.
Okay, there it is. I was gonna say if you don't do that right now, I was gonna be disappointed. Can we
Bonesaw
get
is
what?
ready.
Can we get one more cream of the crop? It was pretty
Oh
good.
yeah, I'm the cream of the crop.
Oh man, that's good stuff.
Yep, and you'll
And
get to
then
say that.
when you hit the creature that you're looking for, do you go the cream always rises to the top?
Absolutely. If you want to dress like Macho Man Randy Savage, you probably should. Right? So I like enchantments, but you're already running quite a few. 8 enchantments, I made it 9. Or maybe it was 7 and I made it 9 tonight. That's more than most people run. None of your artifacts are all that cuttable. Like, I don't necessarily advocate, like, when I build a deck on Cool Stuff Inc., I just straight won't run Path to Exile or Swords of Plowshares, even though when I like actually play the deck I will, because I think you need stuff like that. But I'm just like, no, I gotta put more enchantments in the deck. So like, if you don't want to jam Smothering Tithe or Where Ancients Tread or anything like that, I don't even think Tithe is good in this deck. You don't care about your mana, you're just trying to cheat. And let's play cards that let us cheat at mana and cheat at magic, but like cheat at mana, right? You just want to like pay the 1 Mayael activation for the creature rather than paying 12 mana for It That Betrays. So is there anything else that like you really felt like you were desperate to add? Did you want to mess with your mana rocks at all? Did you want to add the Great Henge? Or how do you feel about the deck as it is right now?
I mean, I've always enjoyed the list. I'm open to suggestions. I'm not married to anything in the list, really, if I was honest about it. The Great Henge is an interesting suggestion, but like I said, a lot of the times all you can do with Mayael is her activation and not much else. So I don't know if we're looking for another mana sink quite like that.
I don't love drawing cards in Mail per se. Like if
Yeah,
like
they get stranded.
You don't necessarily want the stuff in your hand. Like when it's like mid game and you've just started activating Mail reliably, you don't want to be drawing cards per se, which is why the only thing I might suggest creature wise is like some mana dorks, but like that's a whiff. The only mana dork I might suggest is Feyburrow Elder, and that's still only tapping for 3, which isn't great. So I kind of like the amount of cheating we're doing right now. So let's go through the deck. Here's the amount of cheating we're doing. We have Illusionist Bracers, which gives us a second Mail activation. We have Quicksilver Amulet, which Elvish Piper is a card out. We have Scroll Rack, which lets us make sure we absolutely hit the card we want, and we have Sensei's Divining Top that does the same thing. We have Cream of the Crop, which could potentially dig us very deep in the deck. Lurking Predators lets us play a spell for free. Mael Zarya lets us just win the game, that's cheating. Miri's Guile and Sylvan Library stack the top of our deck. Eladamri's Call gives us the exact card we need when we need it. Same with Worldly Tutor. Selvala Stampede lets us play cards for free. Tooth and Nail lets us play cards for... I want to say 9 mana isn't free, but like, you know, going and finding multiple creatures and putting them both out is very good. So I kind of think with the addition of Sensei's Top, Miri's Guile, Eladamri's Call, and we could even... I thought I added the... another card when we added Eladamri's Call. Didn't we also add Congregation at Dawn, or was it Eladamri's Call what made me drop the Eladamri's?
We talked about Call and Congregation. I don't know if you ever put it into the deck. Got a few more suggestions from the YouTube.
Let's hear it. Like we're just about to start cutting, so let's add everything before we start cutting.
So there's a consensus that Hedge is bad, especially with no creatures, and people like to board wipe this deck a lot.
Yeah.
Elder Scale Worm can save you in a pinch, or Platinum Empyrean, which are not in the list right now, but can be
I
considerations.
thought you had a Platinum Angel.
Um,
You don't have a Platinum Angel? Oh. Platinum Empyrean's good
um,
too.
yeah, I mean, those effects are cool. They're not generally run in these decks, I don't think, or at least the lists I've looked at. So I haven't really considered either of those. I think Elder Scale Worm was in an earlier build, and I might have taken that out to leave It That Betrays in, just
Hmm.
because It That Betrays is kind of a pet card, which was probably wrong now that I think about the utility of having an Elder Scale Worm
Well,
when you're in a pinch.
I think you
But
just. I think you wouldn't cut it that betrays to put it back in. Like, there's no reason not to run it that betrays in this deck.
yeah,
There are a few
yeah,
cards I would consider cutting. Combustible Gearhulk is one that's sort of on the bubble. I don't think Seedborn Muse does a ton, except like I know you like to activate Mayael multiple times. So that's sort of a bubbly card for me because I hate to hit that on Mayael activation. I don't like Vorinclex because I think it's a little antisocial, and I think Elder Scale Worm is a little bit better than World Spine Worm. Although, like, this is it's Wrath Assurance the same way. So
yes.
they're
So
your
I really
creatures.
like.
So what I wanted to do was suggest stuff to put in. I would like you to suggest the stuff to take out.
So Seedborn Muse I really like.
Okay,
Being able to untap and activate again. So
sure.
I agree kind of Gearhulk is a little bit on the fence because we really don't want to draw cards in this deck. But you're generally speaking, you're gonna draw cards because there's so many expensive spells in this deck. No one wants you to bin three and then take damage from them, because you could kill somebody in a turn
Yeah,
if the wrong three card like if that betrays is 12 damage if it hits the bin. Like no one's gonna let you do that. So we're gonna draw cards with that. And I don't know if that's what we want to be doing. And then I agree, the feel bad with Vorinclex. It's fine if we get rid of Vorinclex. I'm cool with that. I kind of like the Seaborn Muse though. Being able to every turn,
yeah, that's fine.
everyone's turn at the table, go, Mayael is great.
Well, what about
And they
Nylea?
usually,
I actually don't super
yeah,
love Nylea.
yeah. I haven't played her much, and the few times that I have, there have been like my other gods in play, so it's kind of like stacking the effects rather than just seeing if she's good by herself. You know what I mean?
Sure.
On my battlefield. So I'd be open to dumping her and trying something else.
Well, that brings us to
'Cause I mean, like,
102, which is 3 cuts at that point.
because like it doesn't hurt. Like I'm not taking the cards out of the deck. They're still in a deck box here somewhere. I can always put them back if I feel like it doesn't work
Or
out.
put them in your fat
So,
stack and shuffle them in.
hey, don't be talking about my fat stacks.
All right. So,
So we have how many cuts? 2 or 3? You said.
3. If we don't add Elder Scale Worm in. And you can feel free to suggest a cut of anything I added tonight. It won't hurt my feelings.
No, I mean I think the purpose of this exercise is to try some new things. So I don't know if I'd start there. Um, so I guess like I feel like Wrath of God's kind of an awkward card in this deck. Like, yeah, there
Yeah.
are matchups where I want it, but like a lot of the times it's just dead in my hand because by that time I have so many things going on, and it pains me to say it because I have the full art promo foil of it, so it's kind of cool to keep it in the list.
Hmm.
And like you'd mentioned Austere Command earlier, and I was wondering if maybe it'd be better to run Austere Command over the Wrath of God,
I
just
think
because it's been awkward more times than not when I've drawn it.
you absolutely cut the Wrath of God, but Austere Command would be because you're naming enchantments.
Yeah,
Like
but I
almost
mean,
always. You're not going to name
it,
creatures with Austere Command like almost ever.
in a pinch, I could though. It's a consideration.
Sure. But I mean, a 6-mana Wrath is not going to save you if they are so blazingly fast that you need to Wrath on 6 rather than do anything else.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, I agree with cutting Wrath. How do you feel about Aeroas?
Erois?
Yeah.
Did you just call him Aerois?
Iroas.
Irois?
Is it Iroas? I don't speak Greek, dude. John
You speak
Stamos over
English, though,
here.
right?
John Stamos correcting my Greek pronunciations. Iroas?
I mean, having metas is kind of cool,
Yeah.
and they're indestructible. Well, they're not indestructible. They prevent all combat damage to attacking creatures. I mean, I think it's a good card, but I guess like, is there a reason you don't think it's very good? You don't like
I'm
the gods
asking
in this type of deck?
No, I do. I think Nelly is terrible, but I think X Roas, however you want to pronounce it, is probably pretty good. There's nothing really glaring jumping out at me. I don't know if Chad has suggestions for what to cut, but like,
I mean, they keep suggesting more creatures to put in,
sure.
which doesn't help with what we're doing right now.
So here's
I mean,
here's something that pains me.
yeah.
I don't love Avenger of Zendikar in this deck
Really?
until we add Morog. Until we add the Minotaur. I feel like I'm not somebody who doesn't do well pronouncing cards, but tonight I feel like I'm second guessing all my pronunciations. I think if we want to keep Avenger, we might want to look into maximizing our landfall just because we have a new card to build the deck around. So, like, maybe you add an Evolving Wilds to this deck, or a Terramorphic Expanse, rather, to this deck. Avenger just underwhelms a little bit in this deck. I like Avenger, and it's in 5 of my decks. But here it just seems a little bit
I'm
awkward.
surprised you say that because I see you play that card like all the time. So let's take out Avenger. Let's take out Aerois or Irois or Xrois or Erois, however you want to say it, and see what that kind of looks like.
Well, that puts us at 100, so if we cut one more creature, alternatively, we could cut a land and go to 35, but I think that might be... If you look at the average deck on EDH rack, if they're running 42, you know you're super wrong, but like the difference between 35 and 36 realistically isn't enormous. What did I think I was just going to flip to this page and it was like, yeah, I'll just count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 21 plus 15. So that's 37 in the average deck. So you could conceivably cut down to 35 lands and leave all your creatures alone here, because I kind of like Aerois. Like everything in here, like it's really tough to cut Magic cards out of Magic decks. It's really easy to add them, which is why I didn't go nuts and add a ton of stuff.
So a couple of suggestions from chat. We've let them linger a little bit. Sarah Avatar and Brian Stout Arm are fun.
Oh, ads? We don't get out of here with that. No. Yeah, Sarah Avatar is pretty cool. Brian Stoutarm, it's a great finisher, but like I like Brian Stoutarm a lot more when you're playing 1v1, which I never do.
And then we had we had a suggestion to run maybe some more fetches if we could jam him in there to help with Sensei's top effects.
Yeah. I mean, how fetchy do you want to get?
I mean, it depends on the day of the week, you know what I'm saying?
Because you don't have an Arid Mesa.
No, I don't. I could definitely jam one of those in there. And
like
then,
this deck absolutely, like even if we didn't have Morog, and even if we did end up, leaving the Avengers Zendikar out, I like more fetches.
Yeah, and there's also like Fabled Passage, Prismatic Vista, stuff like that could go in there.
Yeah, I mean Fabled Passage is insanely cheap right now. I don't know if they're signaling that they're going to print it a lot, but like I bought a ton of these and now they're dirt. But like would you play it? Do you have a Vista? Would you play it in this?
Maybe.
Well, it's in the
I
list
mean,
now, so we got to cut
I'm
some
sure I
land
have
here.
one laying around, but I definitely have a ton of Fabled Passages laying around. That's easy to include.
Well, the good thing about that
Um,
is like the more you have to fetch for basics, the fewer basics you have to run. So I don't want to go down another forest per se. Probably cut a plains here. So,
Carl says, "R.I.P. Your spec on Fabled Passage."
well, I mean that's what happens, right? Like if specking were obvious, everybody would do it, which is why all the reserve list stuff is just going nuts right now. It's like, cool, man.
No, it's
Is
just
Mira Holy Avengers a $20 card? You did it, but like,
it's just funny though because you and I had a discussion about Fabled Passage, and I thought they were too low as well. And but it might be like that's the new go-to land in standard. They don't want to print shocks and things into standard anymore. They just want something like a Fabled Passage that you can use.
the word
Um,
fable made me think that it was like not as put in a corsetable per se.
how
But
wrong were we?
But I don't even think that's a thing anymore because it used to be sort of like, wow, that's got a Kamigawa name. They're not going to reprint it, right? Like, and
Yeah, if something has a proper name, you're not going to see it outside of its plane. Like my favorite land, Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. Like with a specific name like that, they can't just jam that into any set they want.
and then that logic held for a while, and now we're like, look, if Valakut the Molten Pinnacle can have a proper name and not be legendary, it can go in any set at once.
Apparently.
So I think at this point we are safe testing this with 35 lands. So I'm gonna slice a forest here. We've got 99 cards plus Mayael, which we can add and make the commander. I'll just show you real quick how to do that in Architect. I think I know how to do that in Architect. Nope. Don't know how to do that. There's a way to do
Oh.
it to make it your commander. I forgot, but if you're in the sandbox, it doesn't
Can you
matter.
right click it and tell it to? Thought we did this once before.
Yeah, I know, but I never do it, so no, not right.
No, that's not it. Thought like you selected it and there's somewhere on the screen you can click and say that's your commander, but
Look,
maybe
Chad,
not.
I don't work for Architect, all right? So I'm not here. Like, it would be embarrassing if I worked for Architect. Like, well, I don't know actually how it works. Like, if I was a pharmaceutical sales rep, it's like, look, I got a bachelor's in communication right now. I didn't take a single science class. Like, don't ask me what Safenadil does, but I'm not embarrassed that I forgot how to to use Architect. But if you monkey around with this site, which you should, figure out how to make a card your commander and then make fun of me. So one last thing we'll do is
someone in the chat says I think when you save it, it asks you what your commander is.
oh, cool.
That might be it. I'm not sure.
I did
And
it once before in my whole life, and it took me a second to figure out. Like, but most of this interface is intuitive. Don't let my fumbling throw you off.
Also, shout out in the chat if anyone has a cool foreign foil version of Mayael they want to part with. Let me know. I have a regular version and I need to upgrade it bad. Help me out.
Well, I think with this list, with this new list, I think you're going to have a little bit more success just on the basis of like you're going to whiff less, which is what you wanted. You just wanted to tighten it up. You didn't want to reinvent the wheel, which is why we didn't start from 0 cards. We started from a deck list. And I think with chat's suggestions and some of the stuff from EDH Rec, I think what we did was we made you less likely to whiff, more likely to be able to play a card that puts the card you want on top of your deck when you want it. And that's important to you. So I think you got no excuse not to sleeve this up and play with me on webcam. And if you would like to play on webcam, head over to patreon.com/BSB. That's a thing you could do with the whole cast. You could even be like, hey, I want to play with everybody but Corbin, and we'll pop Joey D in the pod instead. So I'd like to thank Joey for inviting me onto his stream and for giving me this deck list and for buying this deck for me years ago.
I want to just shout out, first off, the Brainstorm Brewery podcast. Great podcast, new episodes every Friday. I want to thank Jason for coming on, helping me out with my deck list. I'm pretty good at most constructed formats, but I'm pretty clueless at EDH. I also want to thank the chat for your input. We appreciate it. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Become a patron. Go into the Discord so you can talk with us. And if you're a high enough tier of the Discord, this could be you.
Yeah.
Or the Patreon. High enough tier of the Patreon. Sorry, not the Discord.
Well,
that's why he handles the the ad reads, so to speak.
Well, that does it for me. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And yeah, this is something we could definitely do again.
Yeah, and then once we have some people do this, we could probably throw a pod together too. Play a little bit.
There you go. Yep. We'll build the deck and tune it up. Well, that's about all our time, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in, and